The United States is where Great Britain was in the 19th century, overwhelmed, burdened financially, stretched thin with its empire. I think they look at Israel and they say we keep getting dragged into these skirmishes in the Middle East to help Israel, so let Israel deal with itself. They want to come for the Northern Marianas Islands. They want to come for Guam. They want to expand their territory into territories of the United States.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Western Spirit. So today I have with me someone very special, actually growing up in America. He's someone, Erick Erickson is with me. Erick was, I don't think you are anymore, a Red State. I used to read a lot of the Red State blog that you used to write and edit. Erick is also a syndicated radio show host in America and someone who appears regularly on national broadcasts all over America, and someone who knows behind the scenes and in front of the scenes of what's happening. So, Erick Erickson, it's a total pleasure to finally speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, my honor and privilege. So I want to get into something. A day or two ago, you put out an analysis on YouTube that I saw, I assume was also in other places, in which you explained that in the White House, there's a split between what you explained, or what I'll explain, the JD Vance wing of the administration and the Rubio wing of the administration. And the JD Vance wing, in your words, sees America as a nation in decline, and from that point of view makes all of their decisions. So that is the starting point, and that's how you understand a lot of why they're making the decisions on the global stage. Can you expound on that? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Sure. Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of people in they call it commonly Vance world, and you read the intellectual people that they read. And there's this idea that the United States is where Great Britain was in the 19th century, overwhelmed, burdened financially, stretched thin with its empire, and needing to rearrange its borders and priorities. And so what it began to do was, in a tripartite world, it would make alliances for a while with France, and then with Germany, and then with Russia, and back to France. And it was all whatever was in Britain's immediate interest, not for a global world order interest. And when you take that view to the United States, we have $39 trillion in debt. We're spread across the world. JD Vance is an isolationist. He comes from the isolationist wing of the rural part of Ohio, where a lot of American isolationism comes from, the get out of the world. So you put these together, and you've got this: China's a bigger threat. We can't fight China. Barack Obama scaled us back from where we had the ability to fight two wars at once to fight two wars, win one, then win the other. So what if we consolidate the Western Hemisphere as the American sphere of influence and let Russia and China divide up the rest of the world? You kind of see that with Ukraine, and to a degree you see that, I think, with Israel, although I do think there's an underlying current of antisemitism, not with Vance, but with some of those around him. But when you combine all this together, you've got the U.S. is stretched too thin. Guys like Israel, they can fend for themselves. We need to worry about the Western Hemisphere and get China and Russia out of Venezuela, Cuba, and South America.
So you spoke about this with the Ukraine deal, that according to a few reports, and I think senators that actually said this on record, Rubio met with them and told them that the deal that supposedly Witkoff and the Russians put together was not the deal, was Putin's dream deal, pretty much. And
yes,
and your explanation why people like Witkoff, Vance, who was also reported to be in the making of the deal, the proposal, was that, meaning they don't want to have anything to do with this, etc., etc. But I want to focus on the Israeli part, and it seems to me that actually, in a way, if you look at it logically, maybe I'm wrong just because I'm biased and I live here, that you would think that Israel would actually be an asset if that's your worldview. Meaning, if you think that America needs to focus inwards, and you anyway have national interests, for example, the economy, oil, the shipping routes, all this kind of thing. Israel was bombing the Houthis when they were blocking the shipping lanes. Israel is sort of a storage facility of a lot of American weapons in the area. You don't have to have bases here. We're guarding weapons, whatever. A lot of the cooperation economically happens between us. So I don't want to blame anyone with anti-Semitism unless they are anti-Semites, but in the sense of just a practical level, do you think that people on the Vance orbit differentiate between Israel and Ukraine in that sense?
Yeah, I think they look at Israel and they say we keep getting dragged into these skirmishes in the Middle East to help Israel, so let Israel deal with itself. We've got to focus on the Western Hemisphere. I think there is some logic to it. And by the way, I've got to say I agree with the entire notion. But when you look at it from their perspective, you do kind of understand there is a logic and rationale to what they're doing.
Right. So Eric, that's that. What would Israel need to do to get these people off, like to make them a little? So, in what way are we dragging America into this war? So, no boots are on the ground here of American
Right.
troops. The only thing that I understand is aid, military aid, and that's what they talk a lot about. So,
Mm-hmm.
if Israel were to say, and this is something that I've called for, and a lot of people in our Israeli politics, let's get off American aid. We don't need American aid. It's about, depending on the year, the war made it higher, but Israel is strong enough to buy weapons on its own money. And if that would happen and we would get off military aid, would a lot of this talk subside? Would they be happy with that?
Yeah, based on their logic, they should be. I would presume so. And you know, there is this undercurrent that in the U.S., the domestic weapons production supply chain is completely messed up. So every time we send more missiles to Israel, that's less for us here when we're trying to deal with the Western Hemisphere and contain China, things like that. So it should. Now, I do think, however, there is this undercurrent of these, they refer to them as entangling alliances. It's a phrase that goes back to George Washington, that we should not have any sort of permanent alliance with anyone, including Israel. And they think we've had too much of one and should reset the relationship. But yeah, you begin to rely less on American weapons procurements and supply chains. I think their position begins to change.
But also, why don't they say this, for example, at least in so vociferously about, let's say, American bases in Japan that cost lots of money also? For example, I mean, they say it, I assume, but not in the same, I would say, fervor as they say it
Right.
about Israel. And which goes to the point that you said that there's an undercurrent of, I don't know, would you call it like all of it anti-Semitism, or would you call it just total bias against Israel about amongst
You
that
know,
wing of the Republican Party?
there is anti-Semitism there, and I do think you have to be careful because some of it is anti-Semitism, and some of it is just we should not be in an alliance with any one nation as deeply or as longly as we are because they will drag us into things we can't control, and they view Israel that way. They view a lot of Europe and NATO that way as well. That we've been in this alliance for so long, it's not really needed anymore. The world has moved on. And in addition to the Western Hemisphere, by the way, we've got to deal with China because China wants some of our territory. They want Guam. They want the Northern Marianas Islands. Those are American territories. And we can't be stuck over here in the Middle East and Europe when we've got to worry about China.
But on the China thing, I think you also mentioned the video about so Trump just spoke with Xi, and it seems that even on the Taiwanese issue, a lot of this wing is pretty much saying we shouldn't help the Taiwanese too much. Like
Right.
so even if you think that, even if the logic is we need to consolidate resources away from Europe, Israel, the Middle East, whatever, to be forceful with the Chinese, but we're not willing to even stand up to them on the Taiwan issue. So how do you
Right.
explain that?
Yeah, so if you take the Chinese at their word that Taiwan is a logical extension of China, you let them have that. Although when you pay attention to the U.S. military buildup in the Philippines and Japan, clearly there is a disconnect within the White House military establishment over there. At the same time, there is an undercurrent from the Chinese that they don't want to be a regional hegemon. They want to be a global hegemon. And that means they want to come for the Northern Marianas Islands. They want to come for Guam. They want to expand their territory into territories of the United States. First, they come for Taiwan. Then they come for the Philippine fishing rights. And then they come for American possessions. So, yeah, I do think the military realizes the Chinese are a big threat. They have a lot of people who believe that whispering into JD Vance's ear. And that's where you get this real disconnect of we have to withdraw from Europe, but we've got to focus on China. Meanwhile, you need the European allies and Israel, frankly, to
Yes,
deal with China.
By the way, I have to say that the Israelis here are a bulwark of a lot of the Chinese influence in our area. They're very strong in the Arab states.
Right.
Let's put it mildly. A lot there were weapons found in Hamas areas that were originated or brought in through Chinese intermediaries. It's not a secret. So I want to put all that aside. The next after Trump, 3 years, it seems for a lot of the crazy side of the Republican Party, they already viewed him as a lame duck president. Like people like Tucker and all these other people, it seems the way they talk is that they're fighting the post-Trump movement.
Yes.
They're fighting to take over what will stay after Trump. And they believe that by starting the fight now, they'll be better positioned in 2-3 years when the next primary is. Um, and it seems that they are very pro Vance. So let's say we get a Vance in the White House. How worried should people be? Not just on the foreign policy front. I'm just putting. My father lives in New York City. My family lives in Texas. Some of them. Should Jewish Americans be worried about the next administration if it's a Republican administration? Is that something that when you look at it, that we should think forward and say like this is something we should be thinking about?
Uh, yeah, you should always be thinking about it, but I'm not that concerned with it with JD Vance. And keep in mind, there are also voices on the right who dislike Vance so much they are trying to seed a lot of arguments against him now on anti-Semitism and things. I don't think he is. I think his issue is lasting American alliances. He's from the Rust Belt of Ohio, which is very isolationist and always has been. But I don't think he's an anti-Semite. I think he has some people around him who are, but as we're finding out, a lot of people in the United States political establishment, you scratch a little bit, you find anti-Semites underneath. And I do think part of his idea here is he's got to build a coalition now to win the presidency, and then he thinks he can sort out the mess once he gets there. But he's got to build as large a coalition as he possibly can to get there. On the Rubio side, I guess he'd be the larger competitor against Vance right now. You do have more bright lines, and you see voices on the outside like Ted Cruz from Texas who are standing up now to make these fights. And I do think if Vance continues down the road he's down without a few more clear statements against anti-Semitism, it could hurt him, because the Republican Party tends to understand Israel as a valuable ally. It's not just the evangelical, dispensationalist Christian crowd. I mean, there are guys like me. I'm a Christian, but I'm not a dispensationalist. Don't have to get into the theological views. It's just Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. We should be supporting it.
And we're a good ally, I think, just in
Yes.
general. I know it's
And you've got Gal Gadot. I'm sorry, but
yeah,
she
we have a few
alone,
other
yes.
beautiful women too, so my
Yes.
wife included.
There you go.
But do you, for example, one of the things that I'm a conservative, a lot of my influences are from your area of the world. As in Israel, the movement here is being built as we speak. It's not, we don't have this tradition of Buckley and all these people that you have. So a lot of it, I'm looking over the pond and thinking about like, what should I take? What should I not take? And then we see over the past, since October 7th, I was sure, at least in the first year, that, okay, the left is crazy. They hate us. We see the protests, this alliance between the Islamists and the communists slash progressives slash wokies in all of the college campuses. And we don't have to hash,
Right.
through it over again. But then we started seeing, and it's been growing, it seems at least growing in volume and numbers, this really, I don't want to say, it's not, a lot of it is not anti-Israel. A lot of it is glossing over into just Jew hatred. Like Tucker
Yes.
has Nick Fuentes on, and who's, I think we can say, a Nazi. Like I don't think it's like that big of a stretch.
He literally, to
loves
quote
Hitler.
him, Team Hitler.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So he has him on, like, and I don't have a problem you have him on, like, but just challenge a little bit of his ideas. He just like, they had dinner before, it's now known, and they enjoyed their talk. So and then Heritage, which I loved Heritage, a lot of their stuff, I've been pushing here, and their policies and stuff, and they couldn't. He put, the CEO or president of Heritage puts out that video, and like, what is happening?
You know, I don't know what's happening, and I'm trying to figure it out myself.
Yeah.
It's alarming to see. It's refreshing, however. I said on my radio program yesterday that at least the right is having the fight. The
Yes.
left just succumbed to the virus, and
Exactly.
I don't think that the virus can prevail against the right because we have for so long been inculcated against these ideas that derive, I think, from a lot of leftism and hatred. But to see the voices gain prominence, that they kind of came into the party quietly and now feel comfortable speaking up, in large part because there is a divide on the right as to which way forward. Is America
Yeah.
in managed decline, or is it still the global leader? And I do hope that the Rubio side on this argument prevails, the Ted Cruz side, that we're still the global leader and these people have no place on our side. And we should also keep in mind that the Trump coalition, a lot of the people who came in with the Trump coalition into the Republican Party actually were Democrats,
Yes.
never voted in Republican primaries until Trump came along. And so we're getting a lot of spillover effect from people disaffected with the Democratic Party.
Eric, can you talk also a little bit about, as someone who lives the conservative movement and you know a lot of its history, about one of the things that people were saying, and I found it interesting, and I went to look at it, was the Buckley, his the way he explained that the big tent should be big, but there were elements that he refused to bring into the tent, right? Like there were
Right.
elements that he said, this is my boundaries. You're not coming in. There's certain ideas we're not going to be part of, and that is like not canceling. Like, so can you just
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit?
So yeah, Buckley's point was that a movement that elevates the crazy voices who are anathema to normal Americans, when you bring them into a tent that's big enough for them, the tent winds up collapsing. It's stretched too thin over too many people. There have got to be boundaries, and part of the role of a conservative movement is to gatekeep the ideas that come into the tent. And the movement, the ideological movement, is different from the Republican Party, although that's been so consumed as the same thing. It's not. Conservative movement is a movement about advancing ideas. The Republican Party is the political party by which we move those ideas, but they're not the same thing. And there have to be an effort to police the movement to avoid the crazy, because if the crazy comes in, it pollutes and infects the rest of the movement. So Buckley, prior to Buckley, you did have the John Birch Society and others, a lot of anti-Semites and conspiracy theorists, the people who saw communists everywhere where there were not communists, making it harder to actually see the real communists trying to infiltrate. And Buckley was very adamant these people have to be removed, and he raised the level of intellectualism within the conservative movement to be able to drive those people out.
And by the way, I just have to say that people who are interested in this to also go to YouTube to watch Firing Line that he did with George Wallace. And I
Yes.
think it's I saw it last week just to remind myself that you can bring crazy or bad people with bad ideas on to debate. And Buckley went after him over and over again during that hour or whatever of that show. And Wallace was truly angry at Buckley for challenging him. And
Right.
what Tucker did was the exact opposite. So you don't have to be angry at him for bringing him on per se. The problem is that you bring someone on and you never challenge them on anything they do or say. That's the problem. And I think that we should look at, if you're a conservative, you can look back at Buckley and be proud of what he did. I think just in general, he
Right.
built the movement. So one last thing on this is that the young people. So it seems to me that there's a lot of talk about the rift between young conservatives and people like me and you, I guess. Even I used to be young, but getting up there. But that young conservatives in the polls and in the way they react on social media, and you can see this, they're way more. How would you do you agree with that? There is a rift between young and old in the party, in the movement.
Yeah, to a degree. It depends on where you look, but yeah, there are definitely some younger conservatives who they're not grounded in the intellectual arguments of the right. They're grounded in what they've seen on social media, and what they've seen on social media is essentially a lot of performance art by people who consider themselves conservative. So they've learned from the performance artists, not the people who made the ideas.
Exactly. Okay, now I want to go. We don't have a lot of time, so I want to go quickly. New York City. I grew up in Brooklyn to a Hasidic family. I was really visibly Jewish growing up. So my old city is now. I grew up in the Giuliani era, and actually saw the Twin Towers falling from our classroom window. So 20 years later, we have a person who, at the very least, is comfortable with being friends with jihadists as the mayor.
Yes.
So, at the very least, and definitely does not like, I would say, Israelis, and it's questionable about some other stuff. So,
Yeah.
what happened to the left in America?
Oh, they didn't police themselves, and this is my concern with the right, and I've spent a lot of time writing about this. That when you don't police yourself, as Buckley said, the crazy takes over, and the left embraced the idea. It was actually derived from communism, legitimately, not as a slur, that there are no enemies to the left, and so as a result, they pushed themselves further and further left into this crank territory. And there are those on the right now saying there are no enemies to the right of me. And guess what? It's always that's where the anti-Semites take advantage. And on the left, they did take advantage of it. You have this intellectual movement on the left that views everything as colonizer and colonized. And what you find is that there's really there's an ignorance of history. It's who's ever strong is bad, who's ever weak is good. They viewed Israelis, Jews, Americans as strong, and Muslims and Arabs as weak and conquered. So therefore, they're the victims who must be elevated. And when you view the world in that way and take out meritocracy and the individual earnings of individuals, you allow in fringe ideas that take over. And so now you've elevated people within the Democratic Party who actually hate the founding vision of the United States and really don't like Western capitalism and free markets.
Yes, but I would just Eric Adams, the current outgoing mayor, was just here, and I went to an event with him, and he said, and he's not a Republican, obviously, because you can't be a Republican in New York City now, but he
Right.
said that he is worried about Jewish safety, physical safety. He's like, if you have children in New York, don't let them go out by themselves. It was a closed event, so I don't know if I'm okay. I already said
Mhm.
it, but he said, like, I would be worried about, the basic stuff that when I grew up with all the crime in New York, whatever, that was not something that was,
Right.
like, it's not just crazy. It's
It,
really
it's it's
crazy.
a hatred that people have allowed to feel comfortable
Yeah.
with, and it's once it's out in society, it's hard to put back in the bottle. And when you have leadership like Memdani who excuses it, it's going to be harder to do in New York. And what's so interesting here is that there's not actually broad level support for Memdani in New York. It's just he was
Yes.
running against a guy who people in New York blame for killing their grandmothers during
Yes.
COVID and then sexually harassing their granddaughters. And Cuomo has a lot to do with it because he's an arrogant man who thought that he could win when he couldn't, and there could have been a better candidate.
Yes, and there should have. And Sliwa probably should have gotten out to try to
Yeah.
at least, consolidate the vote, but whatever. And now we're stuck with this. How do you explain the Trump Mamdani meeting? Like, why is he so? Is it because I saw in the New York Post, some guy wrote, forgot who it was, that this was actually 3D chess by Trump, that he was basically making the Democrats need to come to him, and the base hates him so much, so then they'll hate Mamdani. Is there any, like, do you think that's really what's happening?
I think people are overthinking it. It's the president of the United States who loves New York City. The mayor elect of New York went to Washington to check on one of his senior citizens who's been forced into public housing in Washington, D.C. And so, of course, they were going to have a cordial meeting. And frankly, if the president did attack Memdani, if there was a Zelensky moment, it would have done nothing but built up Memdani's profile within the Democratic Party. There was no reason to do it. And the president does want New York to succeed. He owns a lot of skyscrapers in New York City. So wish the guy the best of luck. They can agree to disagree. And the moment Mamdani starts deploying communism in the city, the president will deploy troops. And and we'll get the moment everybody seemed to want.
So you think that there is a chance that the relationship will explode if Mamdani decides to actually act on his promised policies?
Yes, I do. And also, I think within the White House, the political team, there actually is a view that if you allow him to do what he wants to do, it's going to be such a disaster that everyone will be repelled by it. So let him do it and fail and let the rest of the nation watch what happened and know we don't want that.
So it brings me to my last issue. The Democrats have gone crazy, pretty much. I mean, it seems like the rising stars, the young up and coming stars in the Democratic Party are the AOCs of the party. And you have Mamdani's, I think, in Minnesota. I'm not sure. I think he lost, but
Yeah, he
still,
lost.
they're getting and Seattle, I think it was that she's like
Hmm.
she lives in her parents' house all the way to 40 or so, and she
Right.
calls herself a socialist. She never had a job, pretty much. You have all of this wing. They are the stars. And the Schumers, I grew up in Crown Heights. He grew up in Parks. He lives in Park Slope, so he's a neighbor of mine. But that's the wing that's like dying out, right?
It is, and it's there's a lot of it is donor funded on the Democratic Party side. And there is. I hate to always bring up the Soroses. I think it's overdone, but Alex Soros, the young Soros, really does buy into this progressive vision, and he's elevating voices within the Democratic Party. And I suspect he thinks that his money can be used to tame them. But they advance a lot of fringe ideas that they try to mainstream, and those ideas are breaking out all over the place, and that they're not good ideas. But when you're insulated, you live in a skyscraper, you're surrounded by security, and you don't have to feel the effects of the policies you support, you don't recognize how bad they are.
So exactly. So Eric, we're coming to the midterms in a year or so. The Republicans are underwater on every issue, pretty much. I think last time I
Right.
saw, Trump is back pretty much to his January 6th approval ratings in some of the polls post January 6th, which was like the lowest of the low for him.
Hmm.
Um, so there is the affordability issue that everyone's talking about suddenly. It just sprung out of nowhere in terms of an issue. I thought about the shutdown time. People started talking
Right.
about it in the media, at least. My father says things have been expensive, but I haven't heard it as a political issue since the shutdown. Um, do you what is the strategy for the Republicans? The people that are going to win, if they win, are crazy people. They need to, like I just as a moderate, even how could you vote
Right.
for an AOC type? And
Well,
that's
the problem is people always put their economic concerns ahead of everything else. They elected Donald Trump because he said he'd fix the economy. The only thing he did was tariffs, which made the situation worse and drove up costs. He's doubled down, insisting the tariffs are actually good and beneficial, and no one believes him. But he can't move on. And so the result is you've got a Republican Party now that owns the economy, and people feel like Joe Biden broke it and Donald Trump broke it even more. And unless the Republicans are willing to talk about these issues, and by the way, it's not so much an affordability issue, although that's the way the media encapsulates it. It really is. Inflation is on the rise again. It's outpacing wages again. We know that in the United States, not a single sector of the economy is growing other than artificial intelligence, and that to a degree is a bubble waiting to burst. And the Republicans own it. So if they can't reverse the tariffs and stimulate the economy economically, they're going to get dinged by the voters. The problem for the Democrats is they'll win the midterms and think they have nothing to fix, and they'll be on cruise control to the presidential election when that's a different pool of voters who come out and vote.
so. But if they win, we will. I'm not being an American total expert on politics like you are. Do you think that if they win, they will then start the impeachment stuff right away? Like, because
Oh,
that seems to me
absolutely.
their modus operandi with Trump is that whenever they have any power, they go to the impeachment, legal stuff, all that kind of stuff, right?
The investigations will
Yeah.
begin pretty immediately. They'll go after Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, over the bombing of ships in the Caribbean. They will drag everyone they possibly can through an impeachment process to be seen as fighting. That won't help them in 2028, but it'll make them feel like they're doing something to
Yes.
fight Donald Trump.
A
when
lot of
they've
it's
embraced
performative.
the idea he's a Nazi. I mean, if you fund him, you're funding Nazism. If you don't fight him, you're allowing the Nazis. So they've got to fight him.
Yes, it's all performative in a lot of
It
ways. It's
is.
all like
Yes.
you're signaling to your base that, like you said, I'm not sure that they're the same people that'll let you win a general election for the presidency, because it's a lot bigger of a base of a voting population that's turning out on a presidential race than on regular congressional districts that vote separately and all that. Lastly, before you go, one thing that I found interesting, if I look at the polls, because I started looking at it a little bit last week or so, is the immigration issue. And
Mhm.
when Donald Trump came into office, one of the main things was shutting the border, and he spoke about the deportations. So shutting the border, I think it's safe to say this is amazing, right? The border is shut.
Right.
I can't, like, when I grew up, no one even like, and this was when there was like 7 million illegal aliens. Everyone was saying the border can't be shut, but it's shut. But then the mass deportations, the picking up of people at Home Depots, all this kind of stuff. And the interesting thing is that Latinos, Hispanic voters are like fleeing the Republican Party in terms of their approval of Trump. So what can he does he do they know in the administration that they have a political problem on this issue with Hispanics?
I don't know that they do, and part of it is some of the polling shows a lot of the Hispanic flight is actually a cost of living affordability issue, not immigration. But to the extent it is an immigration issue, the problem is the president came in and said we're going to focus on the gangbangers and the criminals, and yet multiple grandfathers and grandmothers who've been in the country for 40 years illegally also got rounded up and deported, and they were very heavy-handed when they did it, and that's left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And they agree with him on the issue, but they don't like the way it looks. It does. It lacks compassion in how they did it. That's how people view it. And in the immigrant community, particularly the Hispanic immigrant community, they were fine getting rid of the gangbangers and the criminals, but the guy who makes tacos at the local restaurant they kind of like, yet he's
Yes.
gone too.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
It's a lot of it is NIMBY. So we like those illegals to get out, but the ones that are
Yes,
helping us, uh, I want to just
that's
ask one
exactly
last
it.
thing, if you have a second.
Sure.
The Epstein stuff. I was just thinking about it. So it seems that, first, I'll just say, and tell me if you agree with it, that a lot of this is being used as Israel hate by conspiracy theorists.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, like a few days ago, there was a story that Ehud Barak was being helped by Epstein, and that proves that the Israeli government was somehow in
Right.
cahoots with Epstein. Now, if you're someone who doesn't know anything about Israel, you're like, oh, a prime minister was. But if you know anything about Israel, you're like, everyone hates Ehud Barak in Israel, and he hasn't been prime minister for 20 years, and he's the most hated politician pretty much in the entire country. But if you don't know anything, oh, a prime minister, so how do you, first of all, you agree with that? And secondly, what is going to happen now? Because I hear Republicans saying once this all comes out, everyone will see that the Democrats were the ones really in cahoots with Epstein.
Right.
And the Democrats are saying, well, actually, Trump was hiding all this because really he has what to hide, and he will be, exposed.
Oh,
What's going to happen?
it's become a perpetual conspiracy theory. Yes, there is the anti-Semitic angle that the Jews are behind Jeffrey Epstein. He was an agent of Israeli intelligence. People have said that. The Democrats say, well, Donald Trump is going to block anything that relates to Republicans. Republicans really do believe that Epstein, and in fact, he was mostly a supporter of Democratic causes. But they should have released it all. The problem is, over time, a lot of people made claims about what was in the Epstein files that was never true. It took on a life of its own, and so it's kind of you believe whatever you want to believe about Jeffrey Epstein, and no one's ever going to be happy at this point.
Shalom, Israeli friends. I'm Nikos from the Ayn Rand Institute. For 2 years now, you have been told that your grief doesn't matter, that your struggle to survive is a, quote, genocide. And you've been told that you must sacrifice yourselves for those who wish to destroy you. So it's time we asked, what kind of ideas produce such poisonous views? What motivates those who who stand with your wannabe destroyers. And I know something about all this, because for decades I used to believe those same anti-Israel myths. But some years ago I decided to focus on the truth instead. And since then I've been committed to fighting by your side. On December 19th, join me and a group of speakers who will make the case for Israel's right to exist more forcefully than you've ever heard before. Click the link to register. Remember, soldiers and students attend for free. See you in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, so whatever is released, it'll just both sides will say this is what we thought beforehand is right anyway, and
Yes.
what you say is totally wrong. And if it doesn't show what I say, it's because something was redacted and
That's
you didn't
exactly right.
explain it the way, like, even if it wasn't redacted, you could understand it in the way that I said. And here, look, there's an email from him to some guy that proves that the guy was in cahoots with him, even though it might not be what it means. And anyway, it's a very, like, what is going on?
The whole thing is bizarre, and it is. I think that the entire Epstein story is a sign of a nation that is bored with real life and has descended into entertainment and fantasy.
Yes, and just I wanted to say before you go that I always thought when I moved to Israel the last like 5-6 years, this whole woke craze with the trans issues and all of these stuff, the BLM that you had, and it's been. I went to New York. I saw gender neutral bathrooms and and they
Yes.
had. I couldn't understand it because in Israel, even in the most lefty places, you don't have any of that. Like even the far left of Israel doesn't talk in gender language. It's not a thing. And I always thought, like, why is that? And I never understood it. The only reason that I could think of is that when you're actually fighting for your life, and the leftists and the right people are in the same tank in Gaza, sitting together in the tank for months on end at this point, you can't really hate each other that much. And you can't be these luxury beliefs of like, what is a woman? Like, of course we know what a woman is. And right now we're shooting at the enemy. So it's
I always say that when you get lazy and life is good, religion never goes away. It just morphs into other things, and they can now have these by faith beliefs with the luxury of a curated religion that just tickles their fancy, and that's what I think we're seeing. It's a religion of secular leftism in a country where they don't have to worry about existential threats.
Yeah, and Eric, I know you're a Christian and it's important to you, and it's important to me that people in America who are obviously not, I'm Jewish, but people who are Christian come back to going to church. It's so important for people to have that sense of community and believing in a higher power and praying and being with people who believe and are good and are worshipers. And for me, as someone who's living in Israel, I have my synagogue is right under my house, and it's something that I think it's so important for community life. Just leave out God for 1 minute, just people going outside and meeting each other and praying together and being offline together with people who think like them. It's such an important thing, and it's lost in America, and for a lot of young people especially.
We've gotten very isolated, particularly after COVID, and so we go online and we create communities online of people who think exactly like ourselves, and we don't encounter our physical next door neighbor who might have a different belief. And it's very easy to see those people as the enemy when you never encounter them in real life.
Yes, Erick Erickson, I truly appreciate the time you gave us. You woke up so early in the morning to speak with me in America. I'm going to pick my kids up. You're going to take them probably to school. So life is
mine. So we have this great Thanksgiving feast in the U.S. this week. So my kids are sleeping in, the slackers.
So you're okay. So Thanksgiving is the best holiday. It's a holiday that's not religious I'll say per se. It's not Christian, it's not Jewish, it's a Thanksgiving for the nation. And it's something that I wish we would have in Israel in a different day or whatever, but it is something that Americans take for granted. I think they don't really understand. A lot of people don't understand how great it is what you have, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I sadly, I think there are too many Americans who think that everyone else does the same thing. It's like, no, I grew up in Dubai. I was like, this is, all the Americans got full-sized ovens because we had to fit turkeys in them.
Exactly. In Israel, I haven't eaten a turkey in like 10 years. So it's not a
Wow.
thing. We eat chicken here. So yeah, it's just, or meat, but not turkey. It's something that I wish maybe one day you'll invite me. So, Eric, true honor to talk to you. Go rest with your kids. Oh, no, you have your show. So go get
Yeah.
ready for the show. True pleasure. I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you
You're a
so
voice
much.
for reason. And I enjoy listening to you from Israel. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks.